Shalom everyone. In this video, I'm going to reveal the first high error in the Hebrew Bible, or the Masorah, and I'm going to also provide the scriptural proofs for this first high error in the Masoretic text. But before we get into the heart of the matter, it is very requisite to begin with the most ancient wise teaching from the chief disciple of Yeshua HaMashiach, who is none other than Peter, or Kepha. Now, the chief disciple of Yeshua HaMashiach, in the Veracious Clementine Homilies, in Homily 2, in chapter 38, he states, "For the scriptures have had joined to them many falsehoods against God on this account. The prophet Moshe, having by the order of God delivered the Torah with the explanations to certain chosen men, some 70 in number, in order that they also might instruct such of the people as chose, after a little while, the written law that had added to it certain falsehoods contrary to the law of God. And this took place in reason and judgment, that those might be convicted who should dare to listen to those things written against God, and those who, through love towards him, should not only disbelieve the things spoken against him, but should not even endure to hear them at all, even if they should happen to be true, judging it much safer to incur danger with respect to religious faith than to live with an evil conscience on account of blasphemous words." So here we have the chief disciple of Yeshua HaMashiach giving this, giving this very Kabbalistic and esoteric teaching, explicating a very, very hidden and esoteric matter regarding the ancient Holy Scriptures, namely that indeed, shortly thereafter the Torah was put into writing, certain errors were introduced into it. Of course, through the mysterious actions of Lucifer, or Hasatan. And of course, this esoteric Kabbalistic teaching really is derived from Yeshua HaMashiach, for it was Yeshua who was the master and teacher of Kepha. So, we need to put things into historical context here. We need to have a full understanding of the origin and source of the written Torah, and how it has evolved, throughout history. Already 2,000 years after Moshe, in the generation of Yeshua, there were already a small group of elite Grandmaster Kabbalists and scribes as well, that knew without a shadow of a doubt that there were certain falsehoods and errors in the written Torah. And this is of the highest relevance to comprehend, because there are many ignorant Jews and Christians who think that the Bible is inherently, or at least the Bible in its present form and text, is inerrant or without error. And while it is true that inherently the word of Elohim is inerrant, in actuality it contains errors. Although inherently, it is inerrant. There's a big difference here. And this needs to be most definitely comprehended. So again, the point here is that we need to be very cognizant and aware that indeed, voraciously, there are errors in the Bible. Now, for the reason of the errors, the chief disciple of Harab Yeshua HaMashiach explains in Homily 3 in chapter 5 in the same book. He states, "The falsehoods of the scriptures have been permitted to be written for a certain righteous reason, at the demand of evil. And when I say happily, I mean this: in the account of God, the wicked one, not loving God less than the good one, is exceeded by the good in this one thing only, that he, not pardoning those who are impious on account of ignorance, through love towards that which is profound, desires the destruction of the impious, but the good one desires to present them with a remedy." And so again, we need to understand that the Clementine Homilies is a highly Jewish and a profoundly Kabbalistic text in essence. And these are the very high Kabbalistic Jewish teachings of Kepha, who was an Israelite, a disciple of Yeshua HaMashiach. And so here he's giving these very recondite, mystical, Kabbalistic reasons why errors have been permitted to be in the Bible in the first place. Again, it is for the testing and the refinement of the Zadik, or the holy righteous saint, upon many other reasons as well, as he states so eloquently here in this passage. So now we proceed to the actual solution as to how to discern these errors, which of course requires high initiation into the holy mysteries and holiness as well. So he states in the same homily in chapter 49, he states, then Peter said, as to the mixture of truth with falsehood, I remember that on one occasion he, that is in reference to Yeshua, finding fault with the Sadducees, said, and now he's quoting Mark chapter 12, verse 24, wherefore ye do err, not knowing the true things of the scriptures, and on this account you are ignorant of the power of Elohim. But if he cast up to them that they knew not the true things of the scriptures, it is manifest that there are false things in them. And this is the genius reasoning of Kepha, truly demonstrating and indicating that Kepha was a ridiculously highly initiated Kabbalist and a very intellectual, very perspicacious and sagacious individual, to say the least. And so this is one of the great Kabbalistic mysteries behind this verse in the New Testament, which I am sure practically all of Christianity and practically all Christians are completely unaware of this great mystery and the deeper meanings and significations of this verse at hand. So, speaking on these holy errors from the perspective of a highly initiated Grandmaster Kabbalist like myself, we need to understand within this elite domain of initiation that yes, there are errors in the Bible, and we need to comprehend very momentously that we may state that truth in the Bible exists at the 99th percentile, meaning that I would say less than 1% of the Bible, is error, meaning that it has been preserved and safeguarded at a very, very high level, where we're talking less than 1% of the text being erroneous, okay? The same thing is true with our principal esoteric Kabbalistic texts, as an example, Sefer HaZohar. The truth there is also at the 99th percentile, meaning, we may state that maybe 1 to 3%, worst case scenario, 3% of the entire principal Kabbalistic texts contain errors, okay? However, the same thing cannot be said of the more exoteric literature, such as the Talmudim, where, the truth is maybe more at the 90th percentile, meaning that maybe 10% of the Talmud is in error, because we need to understand that these are the recordings of many different Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan don't always agree on everything, and so there's many statements of disagreement and contention within the Talmud. And so then it is the duty of the holy saint who is studying the Talmud, since that's what the word Talmud means, to study, it's a study guide, to discern which of the Rabbanan are correct and which of the Rabbanan are erroneous or incorrect. Okay, so again, essentially, high initiation and possession of the Ruach HaKodesh at the highest levels of holiness is what reveals many of these errors in the Bible as you're reading and meditating on the ancient holy scriptures, as well as give you the reconciliations of these errors, or the restoration of these errors. So it's very important that one is highly initiated into the holy mysteries to even begin to understand this, veiled truth that indeed there are errors, in the Bible. And then higher levels of holiness and initiation are required to be given the restorations or reconciliations of these errors. So now we can begin with the revelation of the first high error in the Hebrew Bible. Okay. Now we begin. The error is actually contained in Sefer Bereshith in chapter 2, verse 8, where the underlying Hebrew reads, Vayita Adonai Elohim gan be'eden mikedem. And so that's the underlying Hebrew. Now, most English translations provide a most erroneous translation of the underlying Hebrew. As an example, the most popular English translation, which is the KJV, translates the underlying Hebrew as, "And Adonai Elohim planted a garden eastward." Okay? However, the correct translation of the underlying Hebrew is, "And Adonai Elohim planted a garden from the east," or away from the east. So this is very, very critical to understand, especially when we're dealing with textual criticism of the Holy Word. We need to understand that literally that last Hebrew word there, mikedem, is Hebrew for from the east. The word kedem means east, and the prefix, which is the letter mem, in Hebrew signifies from, or away from, or away from. Okay? If it was truly to be eastward, then it would just say kedem, and then kedem would be suffixed with the letter hey, which would mean towards the east, as you can see towards the bottom of the slide. So mikedem means from the east or away from the east. Kedema means towards the east. Okay, so most English translations mistranslate the underlying Hebrew for whatever reason. Okay, this is why it's very critical and important to be fluent in Hebrew and to learn Hebrew, to have a full quintessential understanding of the Holy Scriptures and all the mysteries contained there within. Okay, now this subtlety that is being discussed here at hand is of the highest relevance, as I'm going to prove and demonstrate here just now. So Kabbalistically, we need to understand that the word mikedem may also signify from the primordial one. So this is one of the more recondite Kabbalistic meanings of the word mikedem. We need to, again, as I'm always repeating, every Hebrew word has 7 interpretations, from the first, which is the most literal, to the 7th, which is the most esoteric and mystical one. So from the primordial one would be one of the more mystical recondite meanings of this word mikedem. So now I'm going to reveal a very recondite Kabbalistic principle that is understood by all holy adepts and initiates. Okay, we begin in Sefer HaZohar in Book 1, Folio 76b, where it states, "Come and see what is written," and then it quotes Sefer Bereshith, chapter 11, verse 2, where it states, "When they journeyed mikedem, from the east." What is mikedem? From the primordial one of the universe. They found mysteries of wisdom of the ancients, rebelling against the Holy One, blessed be He. Now, in context here, they're discussing Babel, because Bereshith chapter 11 is concerned with the citizens of Babel, or Babylon. And we read there that they all of the leaders and people gathered together to build a high tower to the heavens. Of course, this was a very evil act in the eyes of Adonai. And so what we have here in context is we have the gathering of many peoples to commit a very treasonous, evil act against Adonai. Okay? And this context is highlighted in the Kabbalistic understanding of the verse, "When they journeyed mikedem, from the east," when you understand the many meanings of the word kedem, because the word kedem doesn't just signify east, it also signifies ancient, very ancient, or primordial. So mikedem can also signify from the primordial one. The primordial one, we should know and understand Kabbalistically, is a esoteric title or reference to Ha Elohim. Okay, and so Kabbalistically, what the verse is saying in chapter 11, verse 2, in regards to the Babylonians, is that they were journeying away from the primordial one, from Elohim, right? If you are journeying away from Ha Elohim, which is holiness, then you are journeying, away from holiness, away from Elohim, which can be none other than evil. Which is exactly what we see happening in the chapter and in context. They are journeying away from Ha Elohim and holiness in attempting to build a tower to the heavens. Okay? And we also read on a similar note in Sefer HaZohar in Book 1, Folio 84a, it states, "How do we know that Lot reverted to his decay or idolatry? For it is written in Sefer Bereshith, chapter 13, verse 11, Lot journeyed Mikadem." What is Mikadem? From the primordial one of the universe. Here it is written, Lot journeyed from Mikadem, and there it is written when they journeyed from Mikadem, just as there they journeyed away from the primordial one of the universe, so here did he. Okay, and this Kabbalistic principle goes back to what's found in the ancient Midrashim of the sages, where we read in Midrash Rabbah, Bereshith, chapter 40, verse 6, which is a commentary to Bereshith, chapter 13, verse 11. It's the sages there state regarding Lot, he removed himself from the primordial one, saying, "I neither desire Abraham nor his Elohim." So we need to understand this very deep, profound Kabbalistic principle and mystery in the scriptures, namely that contextually and Kabbalistically, this word Mikadem has a negative connotation, a very negative connotation, as we see examples here from the Holy Word. Every time it's used, it's in a very, very negative connotation. So this is very momentous, to understand and comprehend, as we're going to see here shortly. So now we proceed to the Septuagint's translation of the ancient Masoretic text, right? In the Septuagint, to the same verse, chapter 2, verse 8, right? For Mikadem, it has, the underlying Greek is kata anatolas, which means towards the east. I see here that I'm displaying the wrong English translation to the Septuagint, but really the Septuagint's correct English translation is Adonai Elohim planted a garden towards the east. So the Greek word kata means towards. Okay, so according to the Septuagint, okay, which is a very elite ancient translation that was done by 70 grandmaster, by 70 revered, highly elite grandmasters of Israel. Okay. Very divine translation, right? If we are to believe that this translation is correct, then what it is indicating is that the underlying vorlage should be kadema, which is towards the east, not mikadem. So we need to then ask the question, what is the correct vorlage? Is it the modern Hebrew Masoretic text, which has Mikadem, from or away from the east? Or is it the ancient Septuagint, which seems to intimate that the correct underlying vorlage should be towards the east, or Kedema? So then we will then proceed to the ancient Hexapla, which is a wonderful work that was done by Origen or Origen. Not really sure how you pronounce that name, but the ancient Christian theologian Origen, who lived in the 3rd century, composed this wonderful elite work known as the Hexapla, which contains which is a text that contains 6 columns. One column being the Hebrew text, and then a second column containing the Septuagint's translation, and then 4 columns with Greek translations from 4 very famous, revered Israeli grandmasters. Okay. 3 of them being Aquila, who some believe is Onkelos, Symmachus, and Theodotion. I'm probably butchering their names, but close enough. So if we go to the Hexapla, we will see that the ancient Israeli grandmaster Aquila, whether he's Israeli or a convert. The point is, he was a very esteemed, famous Rab. According to his ancient Greek translation, the correct Greek translation of the underlying volage is from, okay, because the Greek word there, acheten, signifies beginning, okay, and so his in his ancient Greek translation is in accord with the Masoretic text. Then we see that Siamachus, has the Greek ek protes, which means from the beginning, because that Greek word protes, which comes from the English, which the English word proto is based off of, which just means beginning or first, is a Greek synonym to the word archeten, which means also beginning. They're just synonyms. So both Aquila and Siamuchus are in agreement that the correct Greek translation there should be from the beginning, okay, or and then you have Theodotion, who says that the correct Greek translation should be by the beginning or with the beginning. So we need to understand that the word kedem also signifies in Aramaic beginning, or first. Okay, so again, kedem has 7 meanings. It can mean primordial one. It can mean ancient or primordial. It can mean beginning as well. It can mean first. Okay, these ancient, Israeli grandmasters here understand this very well. This is why Aquila and Siamochus translate kedem as beginning, as does Theodotion. Okay, so essentially we have Aquilas and Siamochus who seem to whatever text, Hebrew text they had before them, seems to be in agreement with the Masoretic text. But very interestingly, Theodotion doesn't seem to might not have had the same text, because he states that the Greek translation is by, with, or among the beginning, meaning that if we are to believe that he is giving us a correct literal translation of the underlying text, then the underlying Hebrew word should be bet kedem. It should be prefixed with the letter bet, which may signify by, with, or among. Okay, so we need to understand that as the written tradition first began from Mount Sinai, that there were a few traditions, that emerged from that one written oral tradition. As an example, we read in the Talmud, already in ancient times, as an example in the Talmud, we have it recorded there that there were certain Rabbanan that had different Torah scrolls. As an example, there is an anecdote in the Talmud that states that there was this Rab known as Rab Meir, who in that verse in the Torah word states that, Adonai Elohim made coats of skin for Adam and Hawa. In the Masoretic text, it states coats of skin. And in ancient times, it seems many Rabbanan had their Torah scrolls, have, coats of skin. But Rab Meir was, very interestingly, he states in the Talmud that Rab Meir, in his Torah scroll, it didn't state coats of skin, but it said coats of light. And we need to understand that in Hebrew, the word for skin and the word for light are homonyms. They sound, they phonetically sound very similar, and their spelling is also very similar. Okay, so we can see how this may have occurred, and so we can see that there was, some differing traditions amongst the written, Torah, or the written tradition. There were Rabbanan that had slight differences in the different Torah scrolls, even during the Second Temple period. Okay, and so this here might just be another example of that, where the Torah scroll that Aquila and Siamachus had might have been slightly different than Theodotion's Torah scroll. It could just have been that Theodotion's scrolls had Bet Kedema, whereas Aquila and Siamachus' Torah scroll had Mikedem, and maybe the true Torah scrolls that truly represented the real true ancient written tradition, as it is correctly as is the correct written tradition, the way it's supposed to be, that the 70 grandmasters of Israel had that translated this. It could be that their Torah scrolls actually had Kedema, towards the east. So again, we can't be sure of all of this. This is, we have to use common sense, and we have to have very discerning spirits in this matter. But what is a fact is the Kabbalistic principle that I have elucidated in this presentation. And if you have a full mastery of this Kabbalistic principle, then you should have the very basic understanding that the word Mikedem has a negative connotation. Okay, so with that said, we need to ask, well, who is right? Right? Who is right? Are some of the ancient grandmasters like Aquila and Siamuchos and the modern Masoretic text, are they correct in having Mikadem? Is Theodotin correct, who seems to be in the minority, who possibly had Bekadem? Or is it the Septuagint and the 70 grandmasters of Israel that are correct when they decided to very explicitly and deliberately translate the underlying vorlage as Kedema, or towards the east? Again, Mikadem has a negative connotation. It implies that the Garden of Eden has its root and source away from Ha-Elohim. And we know that Eden signifies in Hebrew luxury or pleasure or delight. And Kedema is positive. That word has its root and source towards Elohim. It's towards Elohim. So then we need to ask the question, was the initial creation towards or away from Ha-Elohim? Is this garden of delight and pleasure, which has positive connotations, which are associations with Ha-Elohim? Would these connotations be antithetical to Elohim and away from Elohim? Or are they rooted and sourced in Elohim? Now, to me, it's a matter of common sense. I mean, if you have common sense, I think common sense dictates that the correct vorlage is Kedema, towards the east, which would signify that the Garden of Eden was planted towards Elohim, which is why it is a garden of pleasure and delight and luxury, because these are attributes that are associated with being near and towards Elohim, right? And, if we say it's Bikadem, away from Ha-Elohim, then we need to understand the Garden of Eden in a very negative context, which I think doesn't really make sense. So, in the end, it's up to you to meditate upon this most momentous matter and decide for yourself. So, in this presentation, I covered a very, very advanced error within the Hebrew Bible, but there are other errors that are more explicit and more easily proven. They're more clear and more explicit, say, than perhaps this error that I have introduced in this presentation. But nevertheless, the purpose of this presentation was to introduce the esoteric wisdom of the fact that there indeed are errors in the Bible, and to get you thinking and prepared to begin to understand this most momentous point and begin to read the scriptures in this in light of this new profound revelation. So with that said, shalom, amen.